Welcome to Göteborg Film Festival and the release of the second annual Nostradamus report. 1.5 years ago, me and Johanna had an idea about that we wanted to do something where we could look a little bit into the future on what's going on in the industry. And we had this idea, and we went to Lindholmen Science Park and Martin Svensson, and they immediately thought it was a good idea, and we're really happy to have them on board. And now I would like you to give a warm welcome to the writer and analyst and also the moderator of today, Johanna Koljonen. Welcome.
Okay, the Nostradamus project came out of a need in the Nordic film market to understand what's going to happen so that we could serve the needs of the industry and the film market better. There are a lot of reports and research out there, but not very many convenient digests. And when we couldn't find one, in the end, we ended up creating one. And that's what the Nostradamus project is. We can't predict very far into the future. If you think about the technological changes just in the last 3 to 5 years, you understand that that would not be realistic. However, in the context of film and audiovisual production, 3 to 5 years is not very long. So the decisions you all are making today are shaping the reality 3 to 5 years from now. So we figured out a little hack. And the hack is, if we just talk to you, then we'll know what's going to happen 3 to 5 years from now. And that is how we have proceeded. This year's report will be available on the gif.se website at 3:30 and on the nostradamusproject.org website, where you'll also find all kinds of interesting links and things after the seminar, once I have time to post it, because I'm realizing right now that I forgot to do that during the break. I'm really sorry. In the next 20 minutes, 25 minutes, I am intending to present to you this year's report. It's about 20 pages of text, so if you were to read it, you could probably read it quite carefully in 40 minutes. However, explaining it in 25 minutes is maybe not possible. So we'll see how that works out. And I'm just going to put a little timer on here. Yeah. Stopwatch. Start. We have 8 chapters. The first chapter of this year's Nostradamus report is called The Day and Date Tipping Point. This isn't actually about the future, it's about right now, but it's relevant to all of us, so we just thought we're going to come out and say it. We believe the industry is finally moving to resolve the issue of day-and-day releases. In the United States, this way of releasing content is already norm for independent films, but not for mainstream big studio fare. And this is, of course, also true for almost every kind of film in Europe. On November the 25th, we had a Nordic-focused seminar here in Gothenburg. And in that seminar, we said, we know how this is going to be solved. In the end, it will require someone really powerful to do this on purpose, somebody who just doesn't need the money, or somebody who has a big film, but is for some bizarre reason barred from a conventional cinema release, could do a day-and-date experiment. Little did we know that on that very day, Sony Pictures were finding out about the Sony hack. And of course, exactly that thing that we were laughing about was happening already. So the interview, all the numbers are in the report. It's not a great success financially, but it might break even. And this is a very important symbolic step. But there are other examples from this year. Warner Studios already did an experiment with Veronica Mars that you can read about, and there are some other Nordic examples even about experimental release patterns that all show some great promise. Now, one thing that's going to happen in the next 20 minutes is that I'm going to give updates on really important industry things that have happened since we went to print, which was on Thursday last week, and that again says something about this industry. One really important thing that has happened since last Thursday is that Netflix has announced that they are moving pretty aggressively, they didn't use that word, pretty aggressively into feature film funding and releasing. And they are talking about a model where they will have a brief theatrical window and the Netflix release. Now, we also know separately from other sources that they are moving in, they are saying that they will very soon be in 200 countries. So global releases are a real possibility for Netflix if they should choose to go that way. And that also, of course, will push day and date forward. the impact of day and date on the funding ecosystem is just as unclear as I was talking about last year. We have a lot more studies now, very careful work. You can find links on the site. And the evaluations basically say, nobody knows. We think that day and date releases are inevitable, but what the impact on the value chain will be is still unclear. We're going to find some kind of solution because this will happen. Okay. Being the now. When we look at big trends around film and TV production, a lot of big phenomena that seem completely unrelated, one thing that actually unites them is that the communication around audiovisual content is a shift from answering the question, like the audience is asking the question, why should I see your content? Now the new question is, why should I see your content now? Why should I see it today? For instance, linear broadcasting is switching towards much more live content and much more event-type content. And a lot of new strategies or old strategies that are about making pre-recorded content relevant at specific moments in time. So some of that is about marketing, of course, and some of that is about release strategies. So when we call something binge watching, we're putting it on the consumer, but of course what it is, it's about flood releasing. We're creating a social moment when there's a lot of pressure for people to watch that show that week so that they can be part of a conversation. We're also seeing successes with additional content like after shows that are tacked onto other pre-recorded content or live shows attached to pre-recorded content. I did the thing and just picked a picture from a show that I've been working on this year because I know the numbers so well. This is TV-cirkeln Downton Abbey, which is SVT's official after show for the 5th season of Downton, which just finished in Sweden in January. In December, sorry. Downton, of course, is in its 5th season. It's still performing very solidly on Saturday night. It has just under 1 million viewers on SVT here in Sweden. We produced a 15-minute after show that aired directly after every episode, where fans, historians, political commentators, and so on would discuss the week's episode. And for those 15 minutes, we retained around 60% of the Downton audience every week, becoming the most viewed program in that slot and peaking at 638,000 viewers for our season finale. Of course, it was higher for Downton. We also had very solid social media results and indications from that. Of course, there are no real studies, but there are indications that people were waiting, people who could have downloaded it because we were 2 weeks after the British premiere, waited and didn't download so that they wouldn't be spoiled before the real Swedish conversation happened. Yeah, day and date, of course, and events in cinemas are other example of these nowing strategies. Yes. Nurturing talent in the screen squeeze. I am in front of my own text. It says, how do we nurture new filmmakers when cinemas and markets can't carry art house film by first-timers? This is a big problem. So screen time in the cinemas is being squeezed by a number of different factors. Independent film is threatened all over, and this limits theatrical opportunities for independent film in particular, and of course, especially for new talent that isn't proven, because they're always in competition with like Lars von Trier. Strategies for nurturing filmmakers and for creating other premiere platforms must urgently be created. Moving Sweden is a good example of that. And many organizations and countries create these programs to make micro-budget films, but micro-budget feature films. And that in itself is laudable, but the problem is that we don't know where they can be shown. There is no space for them anywhere, really. And that might actually drive the talent to other platforms than cinema, which is good for television if you're in television, but they might not come back to cinema if that happens. So the feature film industry needs to think about this very carefully. At the same time, we need an honest conversation about the quality of the product. Not every film should be made. Not everyone necessarily has the right to be a filmmaker at this level. And this also connects to issues of representation among filmmakers, and I'll return to those in a moment. But basically, there is really an audience demand for voices in other stories, for stories in other voices. And we're only just now achieving space in filmmaking for women and for so-called minorities. And this means that we can't ghettoize those voices somewhere else than in the movie theaters. That would be a bad development and alienate audiences, so also bad for business. The value of a movie ticket. Yeah, the cinema industry is going really well, predicted to grow even more in all markets in the next 5 years. However, this increase in revenue builds on increased ticket prices, not on increases in admissions. And consumers are starting to find the tickets too expensive where there are studies. We can add value to the core product by creating premium cinema experiences of different kind. It can be IMAX things, or it could be that I go to a really nice indie theater and I hear the director speak and I drink a glass of wine. And for both of those, there's probably actually room to raise the ticket prices even further. But we also need to look very carefully at what is a mainstream movie ticket experience. Apart from the film, what are you getting when you buy a ticket to the cinema, and is that worth what we're paying for it right now? Engaging the audience. Yeah, so the industry is facing a dual audience engagement challenge, or actually, if you want to be coy about it, you could say that all the problems, of course, that the industry has right now are on some level audience engagement products. Engagement is caring, right? The audience needs to care about what we do, and they need to care so much that they are also willing to perform acts of some kind, for instance, buy movie tickets. So on the one hand, filmmakers seem to have lost touch, and also many people who make television seem to have lost touch with the makeup and concerns, the demographic structure of their audience. People who make movies don't look or sound or behave or live like the audience at large. So this is a representation problem in the stories, but it's also a demographic problem, because a lot of the content might be very good, but it might also be irrelevant to the concerns of a big part of the audience. The audience is not our enemy. If they don't like our films, maybe we shouldn't call them traitors. Maybe we should think about if we can talk to them about what kinds of films they'd like to see. And one of the tough questions that needs asking, and we're asking a little bit in the report, is whether the challenges both producers and exhibitors are facing today are really just to be blamed on technological disruption, or is there some kind of deeper disconnect with the audience? So that's one problem. The other problem is that in this media landscape that we live in, content needs passionate ambassadors just to break through the noise. And if you interact with audiences relatively early in your process, again, like for instance, just sanity checking that somebody else cares about this story that you're about to tell, that this is actually a way of solving the second problem by engaging with the first problem. These two pictures are examples of what engagement can be. So on the left, a mega massive example that you probably all know, Star Wars Force for Change. So Star Wars, of course, is an IP that people have strong relationships to, positive and negative, for generations. And they launched this charity campaign where you could buy essentially lottery tickets for charity for a part in the Star Wars film. And everybody who knew about Star Wars had to ask themselves the question, how much do I care about Star Wars? So this is a campaign that was ostensibly about charity, but actually it was about making me, in the audience, think about and value the relationship between me and Star Wars. Is it worth something to me? Does it force me? Should I give some of that back or pay it forward in some way? And that's a very, very clever way to do audience engagement and marketing, which is in some sense neither. Right here, we have a completely different example of what audience engagement can be. In Finland, the Finnish podcaster Yle has something called Docventures, which is a curated series of feature-length documentaries by all kinds of filmmakers, the kinds that you would see at festivals, the kinds that you do see at festivals, but many people at home don't see those films until they're shown on television. And this is a sort of transmedial framework where there are pre-shows and after-shows and talk radio and live events and so on around these shows as on the day they're being aired, so that people are suddenly really, really interested in seeing Man on Wire, even though it's many, many years old. And some people are doing grassroots events around it. So if I understand the research correctly, this lady right here had been organizing a number of live events, screenings of the broadcast of the film and the pre-show and the after-show in movie theaters and other places in Turku. Docventures goes Turku. That was their hashtag for their local club TV watching, feature film on TV watching club, and also participating in social media with the IP while also talking about their own experience. And she tattooed it on her body. Now, this is very, very good advertising for the Doc Ventures framework. Yeah, that's another kind of engagement. You don't all have to get people to tattoo their bodies, that's okay, but we have some other examples in the report. Engaging the future, yeah. So the disconnect between the industry and the audience that I mentioned before is a particular threat in specific areas where the cultural change, any kind of cultural change, is driven by young viewers, because the young viewers are not in this room right now, and that means that if we don't know what they're doing, we can't speak to them at all. Some examples of such shifts are the impact of the social culture around digital games, the new tonalities and hierarchies in interaction between talent and audience, like this, I'll talk about this in a moment, and the rapid development of enveloping screens. Enveloping screens are screens that are around your head or around your body. Yeah. However, I'm going to talk about this first. So in July, Variety did a big poll that was published in August about with US teenagers about likability of different celebrities. Like, who do they like? And all kinds of parameters like looks, sexiness, just the traditional likability measurements for celebrities. I can tell you honestly that I didn't know who the first two were and a bunch of the others here. Okay, so the most likable celebrities, and look at their ratings. You can look this up later on Variety to see how the ratings are constructed. But up in the 90s there, number one, Smosh. This is YouTube comedy as far as I understand. The Fine Brothers, PewDiePie, our national pride. KSI, Ryan Higgs, and there, boom, number 6 at the 75 score, which is pretty low. First Hollywood celebrity, Paul Walker. He had recently died and was in cinemas with Fast and Furious 7, doesn't count. So the first real Hollywood product who makes this list is Jennifer Lawrence in 7th place. First music star, Katy Perry, 9th place. That means that all of the traditional entertainment industry in the world, in the 13 to 19 demographic in the United States, 7th place is the best we can do. That is not good enough. Okay, so this is about the tone. And again, read more about it in the report, but I think primarily this isn't about technological change. This is about the change in communications. How do the artists speak to their audiences? And we need to be very careful about this, because everybody you hire 5 years from now will have grown up in this audience, in this reality, and they will suggest ideas that are going to sound really stupid to us old people, but we might have to listen to them. Okay, since last Thursday, Microsoft has released information about Windows 10. So the HoloLens, that's like a holographic screen thing that you can have in your handbag, is a thing now this year. Also at Sundance, we are finally seeing that Oculus Rift cinema and virtual reality cinema is happening. It's the thing. I'm going to post some links on the website. But I'm a little bit sad because the wording could be stronger. I said in the report we say, if you haven't tried this technology, this is the last year. I mean, you're going to be an embarrassment at the end of the year if you haven't tried the Oculus Rift. I'm not going to make you vote, but it would be interesting to know how many of you have. But probably 3 years from now, all of us will know whether this is a serious platform for cinema or not. You might be wanting to get in on that, because I worry that all of that talent is going to come from somewhere else. Yes. Also, Wired reported this week that another thing that had been lost in the Windows 10 hubbub about the holographic screen. All major video game consoles are now conceptually and technologically disconnected from the living room television. You don't need to have a television set at home to play console games anymore. So this means that last year we said that, people are still going to have TVs in their living room because of console gaming. Yeah, sorry, we predicted that wrong. That's not necessarily a thing anymore. Content made to travel, I have 2 points left, and time says I'm doing okay. Yes. We have a trend, of course, that we've seen also if you've been here at the TV Drama Days yesterday and today, of content made in languages other than English traveling surprisingly well, and we think that this trend is going to grow stronger. In the short term, this is really good for the Nordic countries, of course, because we're in a positive position in the market right now, and there's a lot of interest in the things we're doing. But this kind of also means, and if I'm being brutally honest, I think we're doing really well in television because the Danish film market had been sort of spearheading the Nordics into the international markets for like 15 years before the TV drama phenomenon happened. So a lot of groundwork had been laid, and then we could all kind of jump on the bandwagon. All of those other countries in the world that are not Nordic countries, but also know how to make good television, now they've had kind of their 7 to 10 years to think about what they can do next. So of course, in the short term, this is really good for us, but in the long term, the competition is going to be fierce. And the only way to combat that is to invest in quality and development of talent and projects. And as we all know, writers are cheaper than film teams. So putting more money in earlier in the project is going to be of vital importance also here. Yeah, I'm realizing as I'm talking about development that there's a whole massive chunk that has to do with audience engagement and how we're going to have to change in some ways how we produce the content that I haven't actually mentioned so much, because our keynote speaker, Liz Rosenthal, is going to talk about that in just a little while. But suffice it to say, and I'm saying this primarily for people who might be watching this on the internet later and then don't have time to click on the next link, we need to break down the silos when it comes to production, marketing, distribution, and so on. We need to find new ways of working across these barriers without it becoming some kind of useless filmmaking by committee or that sort of thing. How do we combine that with the authorial voice? And that is actually like the really big and interesting and exciting creative challenge for us. We're at a time now where we've been talking about transmedia, and everybody, when you talk to people, especially in traditional filmmaking about transmedia, they're like, it's not so interesting. Or like, it doesn't work, or the business models aren't there. And that is all true. A lot of the work isn't very good because it hasn't been funded properly, or the only people who have time to do this are amateurs. But some of the stuff is really, really solid. And what we're seeing now, and what we will definitely have seen 3 years from now, is that everything in transmedia that works, everything that is useful, will migrate into mainstream film and television production. And then we're not going to call it transmedia anymore. We're just going to call it like drama making or scripted content making or something like that. We still need new words. But we're going to hear more about that in a little while. Yeah, that's the two very different examples, of course. The 100 Code is a Swedish-American co-production, and Igwil Hinterland is a Welsh drama production that was shot simultaneously in Welsh and English, and then you can have different language versions depending on your preference. Yeah, so the last segment is that it's really hard to be a consumer in the ubiquitous media landscape. And with hard, I don't mean like, oh, I have so little time to watch all my favorite shows. Of course, that's a problem, but that's like a luxury problem. I just mean that when people sit down and turn on their television, finding something that they want to watch at that moment is super difficult. Like really, really hard. And there are studies from America that say this, that I don't have a number suddenly on my paper, but a big chunk, a majority of the viewers are frustrated and angry every time because they don't understand how to find, like this content is there, but they can't legally find it. And this might actually drive piracy. We don't know. Again, there's no research on this, but let's assume that it totally might. This needs to be solved really fast. We're all losing money on this. And the side effect of this is that when it's very difficult to navigate the content, we are not using the potential for broadening content that the internet represents. We're seeing fewer titles, and people are watching less and less. They're going to watch whatever's recommended after the first 5 clicks on iTunes or something like that, because it's really difficult. They're never going to type the name of a film they don't know in a search window. Like, that's just impossible. How could they do that, except by accident if they misspell something else? So then it's going to be very difficult. Either you have to build a huge fan base for your thing and create awareness before you release it onto the platforms, or at least we have to do this thing. Everybody needs content recommendation services on their platforms right now, and we need to all think about how we can work together with the distributors and with the technological platforms, also with metadata and things like this, to make it easier for our content to find the audience and vice versa. Yes, and this concludes my brief resume. I will say as a footnote that what audiences are asking for, of course, are automatic recommendations, and there are huge privacy issues around viewing data. That is nobody's job to think about right now, but quite probably everybody who's involved somehow in the film and television industries needs to start thinking about how we feel about that. because if we don't progressively take some stance around this stuff, the biggest companies will decide it for us. Yes. That concludes the presentation of the report. It looks like this, and I understand that you will all receive it as you a exclusive physical copy as you exit the room. Is that correct? Yes, it's correct. So congratulations, because there aren't all that many of those in existence in the world, but you will be able to tweet links to all your friends after this event.